"Sir, stay away from the car," rural little boy warns Millionaire. Then the shocking truth. Before we dive into this breathtaking story, leave a comment below telling us which city and country you're watching us from. Stay tuned until the end. The noise of the engine and the silence of the earth. Ethan Blake drove his yellow Lamborghini along the dirt roads, as if he wanted to be noticed at any cost. The car shone under the Texas sun, completely out of place in the rustic landscape, where cattle, old tractors, and free-roaming chickens made up the local routine. The technology millionaire, accustomed to glass-enclosed meeting rooms and exclusive parties, decided to hit the road in search of authenticity, although his ego was in fact his true driver. His initial goal was simply to drive through the countryside, take beautiful photos, and feed social media with an image of a simple but successful man. As he entered the small community of Willow Creek, he saw children interrupting their ball games to stare at the car as if it were an object from another planet. Ethan got out with his usual air of superiority, waved to a few of them, and took pictures with his cell phone, immediately posting them with the caption, "Investing in real connections." None of the children knew who he was, but they all stared at the car in fascination, and that was enough to feed his ego. For Ethan, being admired didn't require charisma, just the right vehicle in the right place. Despite his initial euphoria, something was starting to bother him. The people there didn't approach him like the urban elite did. They didn't ask for selfies or bow down to his status. There was respect, but also a strange indifference. He realized that without the car he would be just another outsider, and this realization hit him like a silent discomfort in his chest. Even so, he didn't let it show, maintaining an artificial smile as he followed the main trail. As he rounded a narrow dirt road, he saw a skinny boy trying, with great effort, to lift a cow that was lying on the ground. Ethan just frowned and slowed down, still not understanding the scene. For him, it was an interruption in the journey and a possible opportunity for another authentic photo. He had no idea that this small encounter would profoundly change the direction of his life. The boy and the cow, Caleb Whitmore, 10, was sweating bullets in the sun as he tried to lift the head of the cow that had fallen after losing its balance. The pregnant and weakened animal was all that remained of the Whitmore family's livestock, which was threatened by debt and a prolonged drought. Caleb had tried to call his grandfather with smoke signals, but since he was away, he had no choice but to try alone. His thin arms trembled as he screamed for help, hoping that some miracle would appear along the road. The sound of the Lamborghini's engine sounded like modern thunder in that rustic setting. Caleb looked up and, upon seeing the car approaching, raised his arm in an urgent gesture. Ethan parked a few meters away and got out with his usual arrogance, expecting an impressed greeting. Instead, he heard a direct and impatient shout, "Sir, step away from the car. This is more important." Ethan frowned, not understanding how a kid dared to ignore the shine of his $1 million machine. Confused, the millionaire approached and realized the gravity of the situation. The cow was already breathing with difficulty, and there was an imminent risk of losing the calf. Caleb continued to try to keep her on her side, preventing her from suffocating under her own weight. Ethan, not knowing what to do, pulled out his cell phone and suggested calling a vet. The boy replied curtly, "The closest one is 30 miles away. If we wait, she'll die." That real urgency contrasted brutally with the superficial problems of Ethan's world. In an impulsive gesture, he tried to help by lifting the animal's head, but his strength and clumsiness only made the situation worse. Caleb asked him to just follow his instructions. "Don't pull like that. Lift it slowly by the snout." That hurt Ethan's pride, accustomed to giving orders, not following them. But there was something in the boy's voice that brooked no argument. For the first time in a long time, he obeyed. The contempt of those who never lacked for anything. After agonizing minutes, the cow managed to get up with the help of both of them. Caleb fell to his feet, exhausted, and thanked him without looking the man in the eye. Ethan, still panting, tried to offer the boy money in return. He took some bills out of his wallet and held them out as if he were doing him a great favor. Caleb simply stammered. He helped because he wanted to. It wasn't for money. And he went back to the animal, completely ignoring the millionaire's gesture. Before he could insist, an elderly lady approached. It was Martha, Caleb's grandmother, a woman with a firm gaze and calluses on her hands. She thanked him, but in a dry tone, and added, "Be thankful that you saw what really matters." Ethan didn't know how to react. He expected gratitude, flattery perhaps, but he received only the harsh reality of someone who lives without time for vanity. For the first time in a long time, he felt small. Ethan tried to justify his presence there, saying he was just strolling around and admiring the area. Martha replied, "Then admire it with respect. Here, every minute counts." That answer kept hammering in his mind, even after he got back in the car. The brightness of the digital dashboard, once a source of pride, now seemed like a meaningless luxury compared to the simplicity of that family. As he started the car and put it in reverse, he noticed that Caleb hadn't even looked back. The boy remained beside the cow, stroking her neck tenderly. Ethan accelerated with less enthusiasm than before. For once, the roar of the engine didn't seem to tell him anything. The seed of discomfort on the way back to town, Ethan didn't turn on the stereo or open the sunroof. His mind was stuck on the image of the boy and the sentence Martha had said. He tried to rationalize the strange feeling that was taking over him. Discomfort, shame, maybe, envy. For the first time, his wealth seemed incapable of solving anything truly important. That cow represented more than an animal to Caleb. It was the hope of sustenance, perhaps the only source of a future they still had. When he arrived home, high up in a luxurious building, Ethan felt disconnected from everything. The expensive paintings, the award-winning wines, the Persian rugs, nothing seemed to make sense. He spent hours staring at the ceiling, ignoring calls, texts, and obligations. For the first time in a long time, he felt a lack of real purpose, something that couldn't be bought. In the following days, he avoided talking about what had happened to anyone. He tried to get back into his routine with his executives, but he found himself distracted in meetings thinking about Caleb and Martha. He began to research the region, about livestock farming, about rural aid programs. Something inside him wanted to go back to that place, but his pride still held him back. One night he woke up from a dream in which he was trying to save a cow, but his hands were covered in gold and were slipping. He sat up in bed sweating and understood. That family had planted a seed inside him, a seed of deconstruction. The Ferrari in the stable. The following weekend, Ethan decided to return to Willow Creek, but this time with a gesture. He bought a state-of-the-art veterinary kit and equipment that could prevent future incidents like this. He packed everything in the trunk and left before sunrise, still in his shiny yellow Lamborghini. It was his way of making amends, even if he wasn't sure if he would be welcomed back. When he arrived, he found only Martha at the door of the small house. Caleb had gone out with his grandfather to help a neighbor. Ethan handed over the equipment, trying to appear natural. Martha thanked him, but without enthusiasm. "You still don't get it, do you?" she said, looking him straight in the eye. Ethan didn't answer, just lowered his head. As he drove away, he heard children laughing from the opposite side of the road. Two girls were whispering and giggling, pointing at the car. "It's the man in the yellow car who doesn't know how to help," one of them said mockingly. Ethan sped up, feeling a strange heat in his face. It wasn't anger, it was embarrassment. That night, sitting by the pool in his apartment building, he realized that his car, once a symbol of power, was becoming a joke among the children in the countryside. The pain in his ego was slowly transforming into a sincere desire to change, not to be admired, but to be useful. The pride that rides a Lamborghini. In the days that followed, Ethan tried to do good deeds in his town. He donated money to a hospital, organized a charity event, bought food baskets for a shelter. But none of it touched him like the moment he held the cow's head with Caleb. The superficiality of the good deeds he had planned could not fill the void that he now recognized as real. One morning, while reading the local newspaper, he saw an article about the Whitmore family. They were about to lose their farm due to a bank debt. The community was mobilizing to prevent the worst, organizing raffles and community outreach. Ethan was invited to participate, but he immediately declined. He didn't want to look like a hero or expose his image. Hours later, he reconsidered his decision. He couldn't concentrate on anything else. The image of Caleb sweating to save an animal came back like an annoying echo. Maybe he didn't need to be the hero. Maybe he just needed to be there for real. Without telling anyone, he got back into his car. But this time, he turned off the music, put away his cell phone, and took off his expensive watch. He wanted to arrive with less noise. He wanted to hear more. For the first time, it wasn't the car that moved him. It was the desire to be another man. Simple fair day. Ethan arrived in Willow Creek early on a Saturday morning, much different than the last time. There was no engine noise, no flashing Lamborghini. He parked his car a few blocks from the main square and walked to the local market, where food stalls, crafts, and local produce filled the scene. People looked at him curiously, but without excitement. There, his image didn't impress anyone. He was just another stranger in a plain shirt and a restless look. He found Martha serving pies at a makeshift stand and, with a restrained nod, offered to help. The elderly woman hesitated, but eventually pointed to the boxes of apples for him to carry. Ethan picked up the boxes with effort, feeling the real weight of the work that was common here. His hands, once accustomed to keyboards and million-dollar signatures, now felt the rigidity of the rural routine. Still, there was a certain pleasure in each task, something that no meeting had given him for a long time. In the shade of an oak tree, he saw Caleb helping other children sort out the prizes from the charity raffle. When he saw him, the boy simply nodded and went back to work. There was no hurt on his face, nor any enthusiasm, just an acceptance that was too mature for his age. Ethan didn't press the conversation. He decided that this time his actions would speak louder than his words or any offer of money. During the afternoon, he helped clean up, served food, and packed groceries with the others. Every spontaneous smile from a resident surprised him, as if it were a prize. At the end of the day, he returned to the simple hotel where he was staying, and wrote down in a notebook something he had been feeling. Today I was useful without being the center of attention. Maybe that is the true value of things. The debt and the decision. The next day, Ethan visited the town clerk's office and learned the true state of the Whitmore family's debt. The bank had already scheduled the auction of the property for 2 weeks later. The amount was high but completely affordable for him. The temptation to simply pay it off and emerge as the savior was great. But remembering Martha's words and Caleb's dignity, he realized that help would need to be provided in another way. Instead of paying into his family's name, he decided to create a small, local microcredit cooperative that would allow farmers to borrow money at low interest rates and in their own names. He came up with the idea for the structure with the help of a rural lawyer he met in Austin, and he kept his identity confidential throughout the process. The fund was registered anonymously, and the criteria for support would be decided by a community board. Meanwhile, Ethan began to visit the region more often. He visited farms, talked to farmers, and heard stories of overcoming and also of loss. He began to understand the value of the continuous and silent effort of those families. No one there expected miracles, only fair opportunities. That touched him deeply. When Ethan learned that Martha had been chosen as one of the representatives of the new board, he was thrilled. He saw in her the figure of strength and wisdom that he had always sought in his business, but had never appreciated. For the first time, he wanted to build something that would outlive him, something that didn't bear his name, but that had his heart. Caleb starts talking. One afternoon, while helping to organize a small community library, Ethan was surprised by Caleb, who appeared with a notebook in his hands. The boy sat next to him, silent for a few minutes, until he decided to show him the contents. It was a simple journal, full of notes, drawings, and handwritten accounts about how he planned to start a milk co-op with his neighbors when he grew up. Ethan flipped through the pages carefully, noting the detailed calculations, the sketches of the facilities, and even the names Caleb had for the brands. His was a visionary mind, shaped by necessity, but filled with hope and creativity. The boy said, "If I can keep the farm, one day this could become a reality." Then he looked directly at Ethan and asked, "Do you believe me?" The question hit Ethan hard. He answered without hesitation, "More than any startup I've ever invested in." From that moment on, the bond between the two began to change. He was no longer just a rich man observing the simple life. He was someone genuinely interested in nurturing a future that grew from the earth and the heart. The two began to meet regularly. Caleb would share his ideas, his struggles with numbers, and his vision for what could be done in the community. Ethan, on the other hand, listened more than he spoke, offering discreet advice and proposing solutions only when genuinely asked. He was learning to invest without dominating, a difficult lesson for a man who had always controlled everything. The forgotten birthday. On a cold fall morning, Ethan woke up to dozens of messages congratulating him on yet another birthday, but none of them made him smile. They were full of automated messages, promotional giveaways, generic videos from business colleagues. There was no emotion, no truth. For the first time, he didn't want to celebrate. He just wanted to walk away. He decided to spend the day at the Whitmore farm, where he learned that Caleb was planting new seeds with his grandfather. Once there, he helped dig holes, carry water, and prepare the soil. At the end of the day, Caleb handed him a small package, a handmade wooden keychain in the shape of a little cow. "I made it for you to keep. It's not expensive, but it's real." Ethan held the keychain like a trophy. That simple gesture was more memorable than any other luxury gift he had ever received. For the first time in years, he felt remembered not for what he had, but for who he was. He put the keychain in his pocket and said simply, "This was the best birthday of my life." That night, he wrote another note in his notebook. Being important is not about being famous. It's about being remembered fondly. The invisible investor. In the days that followed, the cooperative created by Ethan began to gain strength. The first loans were granted and the producers began to restructure their businesses. The most surprising thing was that everyone thought the fund came from the government or some foreign foundation. No one knew its true origin, and Ethan made sure to keep it that way. The feeling of seeing something grow without depending on his personal image was liberating. He watched from a distance, silently cheering. When Caleb presented the project of the pregnant cow as the symbol of the cooperative, everyone applauded. It was a tribute to his family's struggle, but also a reminder of the strength of each small producer. Ethan was there, blending into the crowd, wearing a plain cap and with dirt on his hands. No one recognized him as the man in the yellow Lamborghini, and for the first time, he thought that was wonderful. He felt part of something authentic, something that didn't need flash status or headlines. Before leaving, Caleb hugged him spontaneously. They didn't say anything, but in that gesture there was everything that words couldn't convey. Ethan would return to the city with one certainty. He had changed much more than he ever imagined. The encounter with the mirror. Back at his apartment, Ethan looked at the penthouse mirror with different eyes. He now saw a man who had shed the armor of success and donned the simplicity of empathy. He realized that his material achievements had never filled the void that a single afternoon spent with Caleb and Martha had filled. He decided to sell some assets, slow down the company, and dedicate part of his time to social projects related to the countryside. Not for marketing or branding, but out of conviction. He discovered that the more he gave of himself invisibly, the more complete he felt. The yellow Lamborghini was still in the garage, but now covered with a thick tarp. It was a reminder of the man he had once been, and how much he had come a long way since then. Ethan wasn't ashamed of it, but he also no longer needed to use it as a calling card. Its value now came from somewhere else. Closing the act, Ethan wrote in his notebook with firm letters, "The boy showed me the value of things. Now it's my turn to show that I learned." The seed of transformation months had passed since Ethan and Caleb had last met. The cooperative was still expanding, now with new sustainable agriculture projects and support for small rural schools. The initiative had attracted the attention of other nearby communities, and Willow Creek had become a silent reference for overcoming obstacles and organization. Ethan followed everything from a distance, but his heart was always present in every decision. Despite his success, he avoided interviews and any public exposure. He remained the invisible investor, helping without being seen. And this gave him a kind of satisfaction that money never could. Caleb's pregnant cow, which had survived and given birth to a healthy calf, became a symbol of the project and was printed on t-shirts, posters, and even small cartons of homemade milk. One day, Ethan received an email from his local teacher. Caleb had been accepted for a scholarship to an agricultural technology institute. It was a big step for someone born with few opportunities but with extraordinary talent. The boy cited Ethan as his silent inspiration, although he never learned the true origins of the cooperative that changed his life. With the email still open on the screen, Ethan stared at the screen for several minutes. He knew he had made the right decisions, and he understood that sometimes you don't need public recognition to know you've done something good. You just need to see the seeds growing. The internal conflict. Despite his achievements and new direction in life, Ethan still faced the internal judgment that had haunted him forever. The fear of returning to being the superficial man he had been. At night, alone in his luxurious apartment, he struggled with the idea that perhaps his essence had not changed that much. Was it all a phase? An attempt to erase past mistakes? He began to question whether he was really willing to give up the comforts his wealth afforded him. Invitations to high-profile events and billion-dollar business opportunities kept coming, and every now and then he found himself considering accepting. The temptation of the old world still whispered in his ears, even after he had discovered the value of simple things. A former partner approached him with a proposal to reinstate him to the board of his former company, now involved in an international impact project. Ethan asked for time. He knew that if he accepted, he would not be able to maintain the same level of involvement with Willow Creek. He would once again be dragged into the machinery that had kept him away from what he now recognized as true. It was Caleb who unknowingly provided the answer. He sent a simple video, footage from the barnyard with the calf cavorting in the field and the cow being petted by schoolchildren. "This is your first investor," the boy wrote. Ethan smiled. The answer was there, on a shaky screen, full of truth. The revelation Martha, long suspicious, finally learned the truth about the co-op's investor. While speaking with the foundation's lawyer during a meeting, Ethan's name accidentally appeared in an internal document. Rather than confront him, she decided to observe him during one of his undercover visits to the city. She saw how involved he was, how helpful he was, and how humble he remained, even though he could claim credit. Late that afternoon, she called him over to the barnyard for a chat. In a firm voice, she said, "I know it was you, and I just wanted to thank you for not making a spectacle of it." Ethan stood in silence, staring at the golden field before them. After a few seconds, he replied, "I had to do it for myself, but I didn't realize it would feel so good to do it for others." Martha nodded, moved. She said that she now saw in him the man Caleb needed as a mirror, and she asked only one thing, that he stay there, not with money but with presence, with heart, with truth. Ethan promised he would do this. He knew that from that moment on, his role would no longer be that of a visitor, but of someone who belonged there. It was there, with the smell of earth and the sound of chickens in the background, that Ethan felt for the first time that he had found his true home, not physical, but emotional. The return of Caleb returned from his first classes at the Agricultural Institute with a sparkle in his eyes. More talkative and confident, he began to apply new techniques on the farm and help other young people to see the future with hope. He brought books, productivity maps, and alternative irrigation ideas. But what impressed most was his desire to multiply what he had learned without keeping it to himself. He and Ethan spent hours analyzing plans, sketching out new possibilities for the cooperative, dreaming big, but keeping their feet on the ground. Caleb no longer saw Ethan as a wealthy outsider. Now he was his partner, his friend, and someone he trusted completely. The difference in age and background didn't matter. The respect was mutual and built on concrete actions. At a community dinner, Caleb gave an impromptu speech. He thanked his grandmother, his neighbors, and finally, the man who believed in me before I believed in myself. People looked at Ethan, and there were no more secrets. He was applauded not for his money but for his courage to change, to help, and to be present. That moment sealed a new chapter in his life, that of complete personal reconstruction, validated by the community that previously viewed him with distrust and now with gratitude. The new harvest months later, the cooperative celebrated its first major harvest under the new management model. Production had doubled, and the surplus would be exported to small organic grocery chains. It was the result of collective effort, the exchange of knowledge, and a quiet leadership that inspired without needing to dominate. Ethan was invited to speak, but he politely declined. He said that the victory belonged to the people. He preferred to observe from the back with a restrained smile. For him, true wealth was there, in the union of simple people who learned to believe in each other. He no longer needed titles, medals, or honors. Caleb took the lead, talking about the future, the challenges, and how the community could grow without losing its essence. He mentioned values such as solidarity, transparency, and gratitude. Ethan, listening to every word, felt that the boy was now a man and a leader. The party lasted until dusk. There was a bonfire, laughter, music, and food made by calloused hands. And at the center of it all, the symbol of the cooperative, a small wooden cow, the same one Caleb had given her as a gift, now reproduced on hundreds of keychains distributed as a sign of hope. The value of things years past. Ethan, now living part-time in Willow Creek, helped young entrepreneurs launch their own social projects. The co-op flourished, Caleb graduated and returned as a teacher, and the small town became a living example of how real change comes from within and starts with a simple act of empathy. The yellow Lamborghini was donated to a museum of urban culture. For Ethan, it symbolized an era that no longer represented him. Now he drove a used pickup truck with mud on the tires and a cow keychain hanging from the rearview mirror. He no longer sought validation in luxury, but rather in the sincere looks of those he helped transform their own destiny. At a school lecture, when asked by a student about the greatest investment of his life, Ethan answered without hesitation, "Believe in a boy who told me to stay away from a car, because that's when I discovered what really matters." The audience fell silent, and finally, they applauded with emotion. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel now, because here we tell real stories or stories inspired by truth. Stories that show that not every hero wears a cape, and not every value can be bought. Be part of this transformation. Activate the bell, share, and don't forget, the value of things is not in what shines, but in what lasts.